you may be in the world. My name is Dr. Kevin Holloway. I'm a psychologist and the Director of Training and Education at the Center for Deployment Psychology. CDP is a part of the Uniformed Services University of the Health Sciences in Bethesda, Maryland, and our primary mission is to train mental health providers in the Department of Defense in evidence-based psychotherapies, or EBPs, for mental health issues relevant to military combat deployment. Additionally, we also train civilian mental health providers who are likely to treat service members or veterans in topics such as military culture, military deployment cycle, common clinical presentations service members may have, as well as evidence-based psychotherapies. First, I need to start with my standard disclaimer, and that is that all of the views expressed today are my own. They do not reflect the views of the Uniformed Services University of the Health Sciences, the Department of Defense, or the U.S. government. Basically what that means is that while the university thinks highly enough of me to hire me to do presentations and workshops, they don't think highly enough of me to stand behind anything I say. So all of the brilliant things I may say belong to the government, and anything dumb I say belongs to me.
Oh, God.
So for almost 18 years, the United States has been at a continual state of war. Over 2.8 million service members have deployed in service of Operation Enduring Freedom, OEF, in Afghanistan, or Operation Iraqi Freedom, OIF, in Iraq. And over half of those have deployed more than once. It goes without saying that serving in a combat zone is dangerous, even life-threatening, and significantly stressful. In this image, for example, you can see a Stryker AFV armored personnel carrier lying on its side after surviving a deeply buried improvised explosive device, or an IED, blast on April 15, 2007 in Iraq. The mental health consequences of serving in combat can be tremendous. Around 14 to 19% of all service members returning from deployment report significant symptoms of post-traumatic stress disorder, or PTSD. And similarly, around 14 to 19% of returning service members can be diagnosed with major depressive disorder. Nearly half report significant sleep problems upon their return, including insomnia. All of these conditions increase the risk of service member and veteran suicide, to which we currently lose approximately 20 every day, and the risks appear to increase with repeat deployments. The good news is that we have several evidence-based psychotherapies, or EBPs, that address these serious mental health issues. For example, prolonged exposure therapy, or PE, and cognitive processing therapy, or CPT, for PTSD, both have years and years of research supporting their efficacy and effectiveness. Cognitive behavior therapy for insomnia, or CBTI, and cognitive behavior therapy for depression, CBTD, have both demonstrated to be highly effective treatments that result in better outcomes than even medication therapy. Cognitive therapy for suicide prevention has shown significant ability to reduce the risk of suicide. But for some reason, a significant portion of DoD mental health providers do not offer any of these interventions. It is a similar story in the VA, where the recent EBP rollout program had as their primary goal only to make sure that at least one therapist in every VA mental health clinic was adequately trained to provide at least one EBP. And the situation among civilian mental health providers is even less encouraging. There seems to be a significant lag between research support for clinical best practices to implementation of these interventions at the clinical level. But what accounts for this chasm between research and implementation? A number of studies looking into this problem have identified several barriers to implementation. First and foremost seems to be a lack of adequate training. Many providers do not have access to adequate training opportunities, which typically come in the form of multi-day face-to-face training workshops with didactic demonstration and role play with expert feedback elements. This is true sometimes because they work in clinics or areas where such workshops are not offered, or sometimes due to clinic issues such as lack of funding, or time away from the clinic, large caseloads, and lack of leadership support. And it is important to note that while helpful, merely reading a therapist's guide is not considered adequate training. Even when adequate training opportunities are available, post-training consultation may not be. Consultation seems to be essential as providers newly implement EBPs, relying on the experience of experts who can offer support, feedback, correction, and problem solving. Sometimes this lack of consultation, coupled with an An inadequate understanding of the theories behind these interventions results in providers making modifications to treatment protocols which are unsupported and inconsistent with theory, and therefore likely to result in poorer treatment outcomes. Additionally, with overworked mental health providers with large caseloads, there's often a lack of motivation to do something new, as doing something new requires extra energy and focus that may be beyond their available resources. And finally, there may be insufficient institutional support to implement evidence-based psychotherapies because of a perception that it may require a lot of investment of resources, of time, and funding, while not appreciating the cost savings that come from treating patients effectively and helping them to recover more quickly. Since standing up in 2006, CDP has primarily provided training and implementation support in the form of traditional face-to-face EBP training workshops. These tend to be 2-day-long training events, face-to-face in a physical venue. This allows for the instructor to have eyes on the participants to see how the information is landing on them, and to engage in observation and feedback during participant role-play exercises of the skills being taught. Typically, after these workshops, free consultation is provided to our participants in the form of weekly or bi-weekly group telephone calls. And for many years, this has been a very effective way of disseminating evidence-based psychotherapies. However, there are a number of limitations that are related to this model as well. First of all, we have to bring these workshops to centralized locations, meaning that instructors travel to venues that are accessible to large groups of participants. This means, however, that providers in remote areas or in smaller military installations will not normally be able to access these workshops without significant travel and cost. Traveling requires additional days out of their clinics to be able to participate, which means less opportunity to treat patients. As many of you already know, many physical face-to-face training workshops also have limited opportunities for discussion, meaning that while the presenter is presenting, participants are expected to sit quietly and passively absorb the information, but are discouraged from interacting with other learners except during prescribed role-play exercises or scheduled question and answer segments. Event scheduling can also be a significant drawback in that workshops may only come to a particular area once a year, or even once ever. If an offered training workshop does not fall on the days that a provider can realistically take away from a clinic, they will miss it. After all, usually it is not realistic that a whole clinic shut down for training, as someone has to cover for walk-in emergent cases. In 2013, CDP, with our partners 2B3D Studios, started building a virtual world training venue in Second Life. And while building this training venue, we took input from all of our expert trainers about what kind of features they would like to see in an ideal training environment. Their recommendations included some basic things like online registration, being able to display all of the media that we use in our training workshops, like PowerPoint slides, demonstration videos, distributing handouts, and automated attendance taking. But they also included ideas for tools to streamline assigning role-play groups, automatic teleporting to breakout rooms, streamline communication between presenters and attendees, and automatic nameplates at auditorium seating. Additionally, we tried to anticipate any technology barriers or steep learning curves our attendees might face. We tried to develop tools to help ease newbies the Second Life space so that they could focus their attention on the workshop and learning, rather than being frustrated by the Second Life platform. By May 2014, we had offered our first 2-day EBP workshop in Second Life. We had no idea whether mental health providers would consider attending a workshop in Second Life as a legitimate way to engage in continuing education training, or even if they would feel technologically savvy enough to try it. Registration went live, it sold out within 24 hours. We knew there was a demand for attending live, high-quality training online. Since that very first 2-day workshop in Second Life, we have conducted 54 2-day training workshops in Second Life across 5 different evidence-based psychotherapies, with a total of 1,562 mental health provider attendees. Approximately 20% of these have attended more than one training workshop. Registration is open to any mental health providers, whether DoD or civilian, and 13.5 regular continuing education credits are granted upon completion of each workshop. I want to show you all a demonstration video of our Virtual Education Center, or VEC, which will include examples of some of the venue tools and features, and hopefully can give you a sense of what our workshops in Second Life look like. So I'm going to pull up the screen and display a video You know? If you're able to view videos in World, go ahead and click on the screen. That will zoom your camera in so that you'll be able to see the video. If you're not able to see videos in World, I'll also provide a URL in chat that you can click to view the video in your own web browser. Once the video is concluded, please tap the escape key if you're viewing the video in World, which will zoom your camera back out. Or if you're watching the video in your own web browser window, once the video concludes, close that window and return back to the Second Life venue here. If you can type Y in the chat when you're finished, that will let me know when most are done. Stand by while I put the video up.
Okay, so you guys, after we do the preparation phase, and really at the next session, you're going to start with the guided imagery tasks. And the first imagery task that we're going to do is the review of the recent suicidal crisis. And I know we talked about this earlier, but really the purpose of this first imagery task is to assess whether the patient can actually produce a vivid image of the recent crisis, and also to help the patient access those emotions associated with the crisis. So you're going to have them walk through in detail, like we talked about earlier, as they did the timeline and told you their narrative. They're going to do that again as part of the imagery portion of the treatment. A couple things to remember. First of all, you're going to ask the patient to close their eyes and describe in the present tense the sequence of events. I think the best way to really kind of see this is for us to show you guys a video of what this is going to look like. So at this time, I'd like to share a video of our therapist, Dr. Greg Brown, who you've seen previously, and he's going to be engaging our patient, Sergeant Bagwell, in the first 2 relapse prevention exercises. So I want you guys to pay attention to the video screen. We'll watch this, and then if you have any questions, we'll talk about it after the video.
So today, Carl, I'd like to go over the relapse prevention task that we talked a little bit about last week. And if you recall, we went over the skills you learned during treatment. And so what I'd like to do today is kind of like a dress rehearsal for when you get upset, even think about killing yourself, and how to handle that.
Really great discussion on protective factors, you guys. I love hearing your thoughts on that. So great job. So now that we've covered the suicide risk assessment section, we're going to do a practice exercise. So I want you to think about everything we just covered, talking about what you want to cover in a thorough suicide risk assessment, and we're going to focus on one area of that. So if you could just take a minute, pull out handouts 7 and 8, and when you guys have those, I want you to just slap me some Ys. Perfect. You guys have both of those. Wonderful. So first of all, just to kind of point out, if you look at handout 7, this is really an overview of handout number 8. You're going to use handout 8 when we do the breakout exercises. So this is what the handout looks like. So what we're going to do at this time, just so that people are clear, I'm going to give you a brief explanation, and then I'm going to have Maria give you a little more information. We're going to break into groups of 3 to practice doing this focused assessment of suicide intent. And what we're going to do is in those triads, we're going to have one person be the assessor, one's going to be the patient, and the other person's going to observe. And we're going to do a 15-minute practice exercise, and then we'll have you guys switch roles. So we're going to do this twice for a total of 30 minutes. I do want to point out that when you get to your breakout room, there will be a timer in there, and it will do a countdown for 15 minutes. So
all right, well, like Dr. French mentioned, you're going to be sent into a breakout room. You're going to get into a group of 3. Once you get to your breakout room, make sure that you unmute your microphone by clicking on the speak option at the bottom toolbar so that you can participate in your role play. All right, so at this time, we are going to get ready to teleport you. So go ahead and click on the option stand, which is at the bottom toolbar of your screen. right above profile. Great, thank you. Now I'm going to go ahead and teleport you to your breakout room in about 3 seconds.
Hey guys, so I guess I'll be the therapist for the first go around. That sound okay to you?
Okay, all right. I'll be the patient.
Okay, great. All right. So I'm gonna pull out my handout here, and we're just kind of going through the handout. Is that basically what we're doing?
I think so.
Oh, okay. All right. So, we've been talking about how it's been a rough time for you lately, Kelly, and first thing I wanted to ask you about is, have you been actually thinking about killing yourself? Have you had, thoughts about suicide lately?
I have. I think about it a lot, actually.
Okay. When you think about it, can you tell me exactly what you've been thinking?
Well, I just have a lot of downtime, and sometimes if I'm not busy, if I don't have anything to do, I just kind of sit there and I think, I don't really have a good reason to be here. I don't.
A hypothetical way that you might do it. Does that sound about right?
Yeah,
Okay.
that's right.
So I want to intervene for just one moment, just to take an opportunity to point out a teaching moment. And you were doing a really great job, Andy, and you were doing a really great job at being a realistic patient, Kelly. So thank you for that. But Andy, I think this was a great example where really when you're looking at starting to assess the plan, you're really looking at two different potential methods where oftentimes we kind of get stuck in what's your plan, and she was talking about maybe looking at means, but then she started talking about overdose. So I think this is really just a great example to highlight that sometimes we need to assess for multiple methods, and you were doing a really good job of just kind of following that.
We've learned a lot about improving the learning experience for our attendees over these years. I just want to mention a few of them, though most of you here probably have already learned many of these through your own experience. First, we tried to create the virtual space to be familiar and intuitive. While it can be fun to create whimsical, fantasy, and atypical venues, we thought it would be important for our participants who may already be a little unsure about the professionalism of mental health care training in what appears to be a video game to see a space that feels familiar and that it looks like a place where one might attend training in the world, and one where they will intuitively know what is expected of them, where to go, and what to do. Additionally, to facilitate acceptance of the legitimacy of our Second Life venue and workshops, we have an unwritten rule for our instructors and staff that when we host an externally facing event, all of our avatars are human. When we have internal meetings, our staff gets very creative with their avatar self-expression, which is encouraged. But we want to minimize any psychological barriers to our attendees seeing our venue as a credible learning environment. We also learned that it is very important to provide good tech support from before registration all the way through the workshop. This starts with a good information page on our website about what is involved in a Second Life workshop, minimum system requirements, minimum hardware needs. For example, we require that all participants use a headset with a microphone so they can participate in role-play exercises, how to set up a Second Life account, videos that demonstrate basic Second Life skills, and a frequently asked questions section. This information can be found at the link there in chat, and it's also on the slide. When registering for a workshop, attendees are required to sign up for a pre-workshop open house where they will briefly meet up with one of our tech support staff to make sure that they can log in, find the venue, hear voice over IP or VoIP audio, and can be heard through their mic. They will also get a quick basic lesson on Second Life skills they'll need to succeed, such as how to navigate, how to sit, reading dialog boxes, and accepting experience permissions. We also begin, I'm a little behind, aren't I? We also begin every 2-day workshop with a brief 15-minute tech orientation to review the function of the heads-up display, how to participate in audience polling, downloading handouts, muting and unmuting mics, and some of our shorthand words, such as hot mic for people with an accidentally open microphone, or as you saw in the video, slap me some Ys to refer to a quick yes or no question. At least one of our tech support staff are available throughout the workshop to assist with any technology issues so that instructors can focus on the workshop and attendees can get back to learning as quickly as possible. The participant's heads-up display, or HUD, its main purpose is to assist newbies with accessing more advanced Second Life features, such as relevant gestures, changing camera angles, and participating in audience polls. The Participants HUD also helps presenters manage the breakout group tool, which makes group assignments, assigns breakout rooms, automatically teleports participants to breakout rooms, and tracks their locations on the presenter's Marauder map. Another thing we learned over time is to include 2 instructors for every 2-day workshop. Together they assist each other in didactic presentation. While one is actively presenting, the other is watching the nearby chat, responding to questions, and engaging with the learners. We learned that it can be very distracting for instructors to track the chat simultaneously, but we share that responsibility and trade roles throughout the workshop. Additionally, we learned to spend time training our instructors themselves on best practices for teaching in World, which includes frequently checking in with participants, asking for responses, and engaging them in interactions throughout to help them gauge the mood of the audience and motivate greater participation. And of course, being charismatic presenters is important. Difficult to listen to a boring lecture droning on and on in person, let alone in a virtual world workshop. It's much more interesting and engaging to listen to a person who likes what they do. So responses from our participants have been almost uniformly positive, with a few notable exceptions. Here are a few selections from participant responses to our post-workshop evaluations. Quote, "I just love this training, extremely interactive, great opportunities to ask questions. I feel like I participated more in this format than I might in face-to-face workshops." Another writes, "Really great training. Second Life makes the training accessible to providers anywhere and still allows for interactive training experience. Very helpful." A few others. Easily one of the best trainings I've ever been in, and I am a trainer, which is encouraging. And at first, I was reluctant, but found it a very positive experience. And just so you don't think I'm only including overly positive feedback, this response from a participant who writes, "Keeping up with the chats and the speaker was difficult. I stopped attending to the chats so that I could better focus, but I worry then I wasn't as active as I could have been." Which is fantastic feedback and helps us calibrate the right amount of interaction in the chat window to facilitate learning without being distracting. Results from our program evaluation efforts have been very encouraging. We evaluate pre-post workshop knowledge gain for all of our workshops, whether virtual or physical. Regardless of the learning environment, knowledge gain is significant for all of our EBP workshops. Comparing virtual and physical venue workshops, however, participants in our Second Life workshops demonstrated higher pre-post knowledge gain, higher self-reported readiness to utilize the treatment or the EBP, and reported similar attendee satisfaction between physical and virtual venues. These results, while perhaps a little unexpected at first, make sense given a few observations. First, participants in our Second Life venues seem to engage in role-play exercises more readily than participants in our physical venue workshops. This is partly due to participants often attending Second Life workshops without friends or colleagues. And even if they do attend with people they know, we randomly assign them to breakout role-play exercises. In our physical venue workshops, it is not uncommon for instructors to report overhearing more planning for lunch or overhearing discussions of the latest office politics between friends or colleagues than legitimate participation in role-play exercises. But in our Second Life venue, there's more focus on the task at hand. And participants know that the instructors can teleport into their breakout rooms at any time, potentially catching them off task, unlike face-to-face venues where participants can see us coming and then reorient to the role-play task before we get there. Additionally, there seems to be a feeling of obligation not to interfere with the learning experience of an unknown other versus a friend. We've also observed a phenomenon we like to call synergistic learning. In a physical venue workshop, it is considered rude and intrusive for participants to talk or chat during the presentation, sometimes even avoiding asking questions for fear of interrupting the flow of the presentation, or waiting to ask a question until later when they've either forgotten the question or the topic of conversation has moved on to something else. In our virtual workshops, a social expectation of participation quickly develops where participants are asking questions as they have them, and other participants jump in to contribute to the answer. Discussion among learners is invited and encouraged, enriching the learning experience for all. And I would not be an honest academic if I did not also acknowledge the role of self-selection bias in contributing to these program evaluation findings, meaning that people who do not feel adequately prepared or competent in a virtual environment to consider signing up are probably not signing up for our Second Life workshops, perhaps leaving us only with those who are primed to do well in such an environment. While I acknowledge that possibility, we hope in the future to be able to conduct research in which participants are randomly assigned to learning conditions. We can evaluate the direct impact of virtual worlds environments on learning compared to physical environments. Despite these impressive results regarding EBP dissemination, we still have some work to do regarding implementation of these skills. Based on surveys sent to our traditional physical workshop participants, we find that about half reported never accessing post-workshop consultation, either from CDP experts or from others. Only about half reported implementing the EBP with even one patient since their training. About half of those reported using the full EBP protocol with fidelity, while many reported utilizing modifications to the protocols which were inconsistent with the underlying theory. While these data are not drawn from participants in our Second Life workshops, it still suggests a gap in training for which virtual worlds learning could assist. And this is the most exciting part to me. It is one thing to replicate or simulate traditional classroom learning models in a virtual world space. As I mentioned earlier, we have some data to suggest that our Second Life workshops are more effective at knowledge gain and confidence building than physical world workshops. But as most of you are already aware, virtual worlds platforms provide many more learning opportunities than static lectures. Instead of the limitations of passive learning in a classroom model, experiential learning opportunities may allow for a richer, more meaningful learning experience. Instead of learning by listening, this is learning by doing. So our latest efforts at CDP are in leveraging gaming motivation and all of the affordances of virtual worlds to improve learning outcomes. The goal is to facilitate experiential learning, wherein the learner is immersed in a learning environment and learns through their experience in the context of the environment. Learning in this way has the potential to be much more personally meaningful and much more easily remembered, particularly because this style of learning is engaging more sensory input, processing on more levels, and is encoded into memory in a deeper way. Additionally, when designed well, experiential learning can increase motivation to stay engaged, as well as to return to engagement if interrupted. Learning is enhanced with repetition and review, which is much more accessible in a gaming environment where replay is an option. And finally, experiential learning engages learners not just in a cognitive academic exercise, but one in which emotion or the feeling of the experience is also engaged. For example, we've learned that mental health providers are much more motivated to learn and master new clinical skills if they have a positive personal experience with those skills rather than just learning data supporting those skills. Like all humans, therapists make like most humans, therapists make emotion-driven decisions more than data-driven decisions, it seems. So let's engage their emotions too. Our efforts were also informed by the essential work of Reeves and Reed in their book Total Engagement, in which they identify and discuss the 10 key gaming elements to facilitate engagement in a gaming environment. These key elements can be applied to serious gaming situations to improve learning engagement, retention, and persistence. They are, as listed here: 1, self-representation by an avatar; 2, 3D immersive environments; 3, narrative context; 4, instant feedback; 5, reputations, ranks, and levels; 6, marketplaces and economies; 7, competition with rules that are explicit and enforced; 8, teams; 9, parallel communication systems; and 10, time parameter. You can already tell Second Life and other virtual worlds platforms already answer several of these key elements, and we endeavored to include as many of these in our gaming learning design as much as possible. So the product of our efforts is 2 experiential learning environments in Second Life: the virtual PTSD Learning Center and the Snoozeum. The virtual PTSD Learning Center utilizes a big game, small museum format, meaning that introductory and supportive information regarding diagnostic criteria for PTSD, assessment tools, evidence-based therapies, and underlying theory is provided in a museum museum-like format with displays and small interactive elements. But the bulk of the learning occurs in a large role-play-like game called Operation Avatar, virtual allegory of trauma and recovery. This museum, on the other hand, utilizes a big museum small game format while teaching about normal sleep regulation, sleep stages, sleep disruptions, the development of sleep problems, clinical assessment of sleep problems, and treatment interventions, all in a series of interactive museum displays and mini games. The culmination of this experience is in the virtual sleep clinic feature, where participants apply all of the knowledge they've gained about the museum, a simulated treatment interview game. I'd like to show you some demonstration videos of the PTSD Learning Center, Operation Avatar, and this museum. So please click on the video screen again to zoom in. I'm going to bring that up here. If you can view videos in World. If not, I will also provide the URL in the chat to watch the videos in your own browser window again. Remember to click Escape to zoom out or close the browser window once the video is complete. Let me know in chat when you are done. Now we want to look at case-controlled studies. This is where we would have a group of people who are receiving the treatment.
Honestly, it's easier if my wife isn't with me. It's not easy to go alone either, but when I have to look out for her safety, it's much more stressful. If I go alone, it's a bit less difficult, say a 60.
Welcome to Operation Avatar, a recovery story. I'm Kelly Cressman.
And I'm Andy Santinello.
In this feature-length experience, you'll have the opportunity to meet with noted PTSD expert Dr. Kenneth Obie to learn more about PTSD and how it affects the lives of those who experience trauma. Gain the benefit of his knowledge and experience by participating in a private virtual consultation with Dr. Obie himself.
Operation Avatar allows you to experience life as a virtual patient named John. As he experiences a trauma, and develop some trauma-related symptoms. You will follow John over the course of 3 important days in his life. The day he experiences a trauma, a day in which he experiences symptoms of PTSD, and a day after he has received treatment.
You'll have the opportunity to walk in John's boots and experience things from his perspective.
Expect to spend approximately 20 to 30 minutes exploring each day of John's experience.
Unlike consultation and training you may have experienced in the past, Dr. Obi has some unorthodox and imaginative ways of teaching. Get ready for a wholly unique, immersive experience. You'll wish all your consultation was like this. When you're ready, you can find Dr. Obi waiting for you in any of the clinical offices in the hallway to your right. Go right in and sit down and begin this unusual and highly engaging experience.
I apologize. I was saying a lot of stuff without my mic on, and I do that all the time. So thank you for the prompts. I hope you've been following along. I'm going to pick up right there with third. So third, utilizing gaming throughout, even multiple mini games, enhances learning and engagement. It also provides a learner multiple opportunities to try out various approaches and outcomes with playability, which is an important element in their learning. And fourth, we learned that field of dreams isn't true. If you build it, they will come is the biggest lie out there. Instead, create a reason for visitors to be there. Create shared experiences that facilitate interactions. Incorporate virtual learning environments into other experiences that your learners are already accessing. For example, we've started incorporating the storyline from Operation Avatar into our PTSD didactic workshop materials as a case study woven throughout the course to illustrate concepts, but a compelling story to the data. Then we invite our participants to visit the virtual environment to augment their learning, elaborate on the concepts they've learned. And finally, validate, validate, validate. It is vital that we continually evaluate and validate the learning happening in these environments, ensuring the utility of these learning experiences and being able to demonstrate to the naysayers who assume that play cannot be useful, professional, or valid, these efforts are worthy of our time and can result in deeper, more powerful learning. We're honored to be able to show these environments to all of you, both in this presentation and also in a Virtual World's Best Practices in Education Immersive Experience presentation. We invite all of you to check us out. These environments are open to the public right now, and you're welcome to visit anytime. We also invite you to join us on April 17th from 2 to 3:30 p.m. Second Life time, where we'll have several of our PTSD and sleep experts on hand who contributed to the development of these environments, who can answer questions and discuss what we've learned. Thank you so much for your attendance and attention. I appreciate that there is a community of practice for those that believe in the power of virtual worlds to enhance learning, and I'm so happy to be able to share with all of you. I invite you to contact me with questions at my email address on the slide and here in the chat. Additionally, I'm happy to answer any questions that you have now in the time remaining. You can both type your question in chat and speak it verbally. That would be most appreciated, and I'll try to answer similarly. Thank you again.